Good evening. Welcome to the Crime and Disorder Joint Scrutiny Committee. I'll just go through some housekeeping. The fire evacuation procedures for this evening's meeting. There are no fire alarms scheduled for the evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of the room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Just to remind you that this meeting is being webcast live on the internet. And if you could please switch your phones off to silent or switch them off. Okay, so if we move to the agenda, the first item on the agenda is obviously the appointment of a chair for this evening's meeting. Do I have a proposer for anyone to nominate?
Councillor Diane Bedford, I'm proposing Councillor Dibble.
Okay, and is there a seconder?
Yeah, Councillor Jeffs, I'll second the nomination of Councillor Dibble.
Okay, thank you. Is that all agreed by the committee? Yes. Would you like to come up, Councillor Dibble?
Thank you very much indeed. Thank my colleagues, Councillor Bedford and Councillor Jeffers from Rushmore. Didn't expect to be in the chair tonight, so please, we'll try and have a friendly and positive meeting. But it would be quite good, actually, if we could just go around and introduce ourselves. Yeah, I'm Councillor Keith Dibble, Councillor for North Town in Aldershot and been on Rushmore many years, 38 years, so, and was previously on the police and crime panel for the first 4 years of its, the Hampshire and Isle of Wight one, first 4 years of its inception. So if you just want to go around, Daniel first.
Yeah, good evening. Daniel White, Community Support Manager at Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council. Also acting on behalf of the Chair of the Community Safety Partnership this evening as well.
Good evening, David Lipscombe, Community Safety Manager for Rushmore Borough Council.
Good evening, Debbie Mason, Community Safety Team Leader, Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council.
Good evening, Rachel Wilkinson, Community Safety Manager at Hart District Council.
Good evening, Temporary District Commander Kirsten Trayman from Hart and Rushmore.
Yes, good evening, Scott Johnson, District Commander at Basingstoke.
Good evening, Nick Burley, Garrison Commander for Aldershot Garrison.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Alex Jones, Northwest Team Manager for the Youth Offending Team.
Jessica Berry, Senior Commissioner with the Hampshire and Isle of Wight CCG.
The back row.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Jenny Vaux. I'm the Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council Cabinet Member for Partnerships.
Good evening, I'm Samantha Charlton and I am Community Wellbeing Manager at Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council.
Good evening, James Knight, Rushmore Borough Council Service Manager for Police Protection.
So if we can move from the professionals to the lay councillors, dare I say it.
Good evening, Councillor Peter Wildsmith, Hart District Council.
Good evening, Councillor Mark Butcher, Hart District Council.
Hi, I'm Councillor Michael Hartsorrell, Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council.
Good evening, Councillor Sam Jeans, Basingstoke.
Good evening, Councillor Lee Jeffers, Rushmore Borough Council.
Good evening, Councillor Diane Bedford from Rushmore.
I know you're here for a particular item, but if you could introduce yourself.
Good evening, Andrew Bowes, Ward Councillor for Brighton Hill.
And the gentleman next to you.
Julia Levy, Democratic Services Team Leader.
Thank you all very much for that. You won't be tested on your names later, but you do have name badges or signs for those of us at the top table. So moving along, any apologies for absence or substitutions? So we've had apologies from Councillor Edwards, Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council. Councillor Davis to replace Councillor Butler for Hart. So neither are here yet, so 100% track record. And of course, Councillor Jeffers from Rushmore replacing Councillor Mike Smith. So thank you for that. Any declarations of interest from members or our professional colleagues? Please don't all look so serious. Yeah. Okay, let's move on then to any urgent matters. Nothing's been tabled, has it? So,
not one.
Okay. Moving on then to minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of June last year, which was a Teams meeting. And I'm pleased to note that I arrived at 12 minutes late, so the minutes are very accurate. So if we can go through them, I just need to bring it up. Page by page, and we're actually checking the accuracy of the minutes. So page 5, any comment? 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so would someone like to propose those a true and accurate record? Councillor Jeffers?
Yes, I'll propose that.
If I'm allowed, I was here, so I could second that, yeah. Okay, everyone in agreement to that, thank you. Now we move on to the real business of the evening, which is item 6, the performance review of the Safer North Hampshire Strategic Community Safety Partnership 21 to 22. Now, I think, Daniel, you're going to introduce that, and then after Daniel's finished his introduction, we'll invite our guest speaker, or our speaker, to address the panel. Daniel, over to you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Good evening, everyone. So, as explained earlier, I'm stepping in on behalf of Councillor Bound, who's been the chair of the Community Safety Partnership over the municipal period covering 21 to 22. For those which aren't aware, Councillor Bound has recently stepped down from his role as chair of the Community Safety Partnership. He would have been here this evening to present the report, unfortunately couldn't be due to another clashing appointment. So I've come in to present the report on his behalf. What I propose to do is just provide a bit of a brief summary of the report, and I think what will be probably most beneficial is then obviously we've got a range of partners here, and to go around the room and to receive updates from each partner on the work of the partnership. Yeah. So I'm
just on that, yeah, we'll take the opening from Daniel, then we'll take Basingstoke, Hart, Rushmore, Police Basingstoke, Police Rushmore, Hart, the Army, CCG, Fire, and if the youth offenders are here, we'll take that as well. If everyone happy with that? Good, thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, the summary of the report. So the chair's report in the public pack, I think starts on page, on my page now, on page 16, is the chair's report for Over and Scrutiny. Just to provide a bit of a brief kind of overview of that. That this is all in relation to the partnership work which has taken place across the Community Safety Partnership area, and the priorities and how we address these. So just as a bit of an introduction, community safety is best seen as an aspect of quality of life, which individuals and communities are protected and equipped to cope with an increased capacity to resist crime, disorder and antisocial behaviour. So that's what we're all working towards as partners. So to ensure this can happen, statutory and non-statutory partners work closely together to tackle a range of issues, and that's in terms of identifying priorities, which we do and have a statutory responsibility to do, analyse the trends, and then work together to set them targets and set out the work which we're going to do together to achieve positive community safety outcomes. Over the last year, so this is reflecting, and the purpose of this overview and scrutiny is reflecting back over the 21-22 year. The priorities of the Community Safety Partnership are identified as antisocial behaviour, which includes youth-related antisocial behaviour and neighbour-related antisocial behaviour. Second, knife and blade-related incidents with a specific focus on robbery. And the third priority is crimes with historically low levels of reporting. So that includes things like domestic crime, hate crime, and violence against women and girls. So subjects which we often find, sometimes limited on reports. So it's about working to address them. I think it's important to recognise as well the last year has been, the last couple of years, but it included, obviously we're reviewing the 21-22 year, has still been impacted by COVID-19 pandemic. So there's obviously been periods of restrictions on working and socialising, and that will have obviously had an impact on crime and disorder trends as well. As well as shifting priorities for many of our partners which are here today. So they've had to, whilst we're working on our collective priorities, there's also been that shift in terms of COVID-19 priorities as well, which have to come in. Just to give a bit of a background, I don't want to focus too much on facts and figures and the law, but just to provide that bit of an overview. Overall crime, so across the Safe and North Hampshire area, is 63.9 crimes per 1,000 population were recorded in the last year. So that was a 21% increase compared to the previous year. And I think then we'll reflect back, that was also during the main time during the COVID pandemic. But there was a 3% reduction compared to the 19-20 year, so just before COVID. So in terms of the report, I probably don't feel it's beneficial for me to go through any more of the report in detail. There's obviously a range of our partners here from the Community Safety Partnership, and they'll be best placed to present some of the work which has happened across the partnership area, and in relation to the set priorities of the CSP as well. So as we've agreed with the chair, I'd propose that we go round and start with some of them updates.
Okay, well we'll invite, before I invite Councillor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. As I said, I'm one of the ward councillors for Brighton Hill in Basingstoke. Last year in Brighton Hill, we undertook a resident survey and received several hundred replies. Among the topics was a section on crime. While 97% felt very or fairly safe in the home or outside during the day, this dropped to only half of the respondents feeling very or fairly safe out and about at night. This appears to be largely due to the fear of antisocial behaviour, which is backed up by the increase in reports received by us as councillors. These incidents typically include public drug taking, often in parks and near children's play areas, intimidating behaviour, such as groups hanging around in parks and shouting abuse at passers-by, graffiti and stealing parcels from people's doorsteps. These might sound like minor nuisances, until they start regularly happening on your street or near where your children like to play. We've also seen a significant problem with car meets at various locations, at St Michael's Retail Park, Asda, Brighton Hill playing fields, as well as further afield at the Leisure Park. Unfortunately, this has been made worse with the recent success in preventing them at Sainsbury's, as they relocate, causing misery elsewhere. These meets are becoming a major issue as the noise regularly keeps residents awake until the early hours. As things stand, we don't feel as though a workable solution to the problem of car meets has been found. In fact, it seems to be getting worse. The meets often take place on private land, but the landlords are reluctant to get involved. Police response times are such that even if the cars leave as soon as the police arrive, they've already kept residents awake, sometimes for hours. And then they just come back another night, and the whole thing starts again. Revving engines, popping exhausts, fumes that surely fail any emission test, squealing of brakes, and speeding around the car park and on the road. We keep telling residents to log the incidents so that the police can identify trouble spots, but they're getting discouraged because they're not seeing any improvement, despite the issue being identified as a strategic priority by the Borough Council and the police. One resident who contacted us said, "Every time this happens, we call 101, we can be on hold for almost an hour before being answered, and then sometimes there are no police available to attend. This can carry on for hours before they get moved on." Worse, a resident was told it was not disturbing the peace, and unless they are witnessed doing anything wrong by the police, there is nothing to be done. But the police don't get there in time to see them doing any wrong. We're always a step or two behind, and it's hard to provide any evidence of progress. It feels like the drivers know this and assume that they'll never have to face consequences for their actions, sometimes bragging about it on social media. We would like to see some resources focused on antisocial behaviour, and particularly a properly resourced plan to tackle the growing problems of car meets, perhaps along the lines the Borough Council has started to take with fly tipping, i.e. tough enforcement action is taken and then heavily publicised so that everyone knows the risks of getting involved. As an aside, we would like to put on record that we were very impressed and thankful with the speed of the police's response to the recent murder in Brighton Hill. It showed policing at its best and has helped to reassure the community after a frightening and tragic incident. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Councillor Bowes. Would our colleagues or partners from Basingstoke and Dean please like to respond first of all to that, please?
Okay. Thank you very much indeed for raising those points. So I'm new into Basingstoke District Commander, having taken over from Matt just 6 weeks ago. And I've listened to a number of partners and people around car meets and just seeing some of the operational response. And I do hear the concerns that you raise. I've been in discussion with Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council, with my colleagues from our roads policing teams. And as you know, particularly on some of the evenings, which tend to be the weekend evenings at those times, they are the peak times of demand, and there is often that pinch, and that's not something that is new to anybody. They are challenging to problem solve. You quite rightly highlighted some of the good work at Sainsbury's, where a private car park with the camera set up was able to deter that. Of course, that does, as you rightly say, push it elsewhere. And we are actively looking at those options. They are a bit more difficult where there are either public rights of way, for example, through the Asda site, or at the leisure park where there's multiple businesses and so forth. But we are, my colleague Inspector Richard Lane, some of you may well know, is going to be reinvigorating our relationship with the security team at the leisure park, which seems to be a popular venue. And we do have a comprehensive public order structure in place. We have an action plan that we follow, and where there are prolonged incidents of disorder, we will deploy a range of tactics and resources, including our drones, which we're getting better at, or getting more of, I should say. And so we have our response plan, but of course it is finite set against the other demands at that time, as you recognise. So it is a dialogue I'm really keen to continue. I'd certainly like to, as your district commander, really will have to speak outside this forum as well. I'm sure I'll be delighted to do that. So we had one just think last Friday at the leisure park. We did attend. It wasn't the biggest of the meets we've seen, and generally the incident disorder were low, thankfully. We know that has not been the case in all places, and certainly in Basingstoke and elsewhere where there has been more incidents of disorder. So it is something we're actively aware of. It is very much it's a seasonal thing. As we know, at this time of year it tends to reach its peak, but we actively monitor it. So I look forward to keeping that dialogue open with you. You're welcome.
Thank you. Would our colleagues from Basingstoke Council like to comment at all?
I don't mind. Okay. Thank you for expressing some of the concerns from residents as well. in terms of some of the what you mentioned there is quite a few things which are already kind of in the pipeline and partnership work which is happening, and I think obviously that obviously needs to continue, and I think there's still obviously some work to do there. I think something which we've done in the past, and I think in terms of, I don't think we're here to solve that particular issue, and obviously it's a long-standing issue this evening, but I think certainly from us as an offer, and I'm sure our police colleagues would be willing to participate as well, we'd be happy to speak further following the meeting, arrange a time to speak with ward councillors in the affected ward, and go through a bit of an action plan and start to look at what we can do to work together to resolve some of the issues.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Councillor, for bringing that forward. Unfortunately, we're not allowed a Q&A on this, but I think as you know, the partners have said, please continue the dialogue, and thank you very much for bringing a very important issue to this group, and I think all the ward councillors here could relate to many of the points you raised, but thank you very much. So you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. Oh dear, there can't be anything more important than this. You've just told us how important it is, and now you're leaving us, but there we are. Can I remind all the colleagues here that page 22 of the pack is the Community Safety Partnership Plan 20 to 23, which really is the plan that we're working to, and the reports we're about to receive relate to that. So if we could ask, through the chair, ask our colleagues at Basingstoke and Dean to give us a brief outline of their issues. I think that starts at, or their priorities at page 29, I think it is.
I think it's back over to me again, isn't it? Sorry. That's why you're
at the top table here.
So yeah, just to provide a bit of an overview, and I think as mentioned in the report, obviously we go around to partners and be able to demonstrate some of the work which has taken place against some of the priorities from what we're working as organisations, but much of that work's done in partnership. So on behalf of Basingstoke and Dean and some of the work which we've done in relation to them priorities, I'll start with antisocial behaviour. With antisocial behaviour, we have a community safety patrol team at Basingstoke and Dean. So they provide high visibility patrols to reassure the local community across the borough of Basingstoke and Dean, and will robustly deal with incidents of antisocial behaviour, which includes not only what you may commonly refer to as that kind of rowdy and inconsiderate behaviour, but also environmental issues as well, which are affect the local communities and relate to the council's plans as well and priorities. So that they will work closely with local communities and partners to problem solve antisocial behaviour issues, and a robust approach is taken to dealing with antisocial behaviour and environmental crimes, as well as organising various antisocial behaviour campaigns as well. So during the 21-22 year, 1,422 incidents were dealt with, and one of the methods used in terms of dealing with antisocial behaviour will use warning notices. So 73 warning notices were issued in the last year as well. We're also fortunate we've got a community safety team at Basingstoke and Dean. So one of their main responsibilities is around management and coordination of antisocial behaviour cases. Much of that work is done through our antisocial behaviour panel. So we have a really well attended panel in Basingstoke where partners, most commonly I would say it's from other council referrals, from police referrals and from housing associations, can refer into the panel where there's then a case discussion around individual cases of antisocial behaviour, and a bit of a strategy is put together to look at how we can work together to resolve some of them issues, and that can be affecting people and places as well. So the team also provides support and guidance in relation to antisocial behaviour concerns which are coming up, and provide that analysis across the Safe North Hampshire area. We have a shared analyst which can help in terms of mapping some where problems are, and that joint coordination of the Community Safety Partnership. and one of the analyst roles as well, and it takes place across the three districts which we referred to this evening. We have quarterly review meetings as well, so to look at where problems are happening, some of the data which exists around that, and can start to plan work around that in partnership. Some of the things which the team have done over the last year, so we had a public space protection order which was introduced in the town centre in Basingstoke and some of the surrounding parks and open spaces, and that was put in place after public consultation to tackle alcohol-related nuisance within the town centre and some of them surrounding parks and open spaces, and yeah, so far seems to have been a success. We've had two, I'm sure you may have heard of community triggers. I know there's been some recent media attention on community triggers. I think it was recently on a Panorama programme. But they are where communities can raise a trigger when they're concerned that antisocial behaviour hasn't been dealt with effectively. So we've had two, which have been two activations in the last year. Neither of them met the threshold. However, with the quality partnership work which we have in Basingstoke and the ASB panel, them cases were still fully reviewed and able to be addressed. In terms of customer feedback, which is another thing which we go out and get, after dealing with antisocial behaviour incidents, we always look at kind of getting that feedback from customers actually to whether that's made a difference to their quality of life, reduced antisocial behaviour, or if it's in relation to environmental crimes, whether the area feels cleaner and tidier as well. So 91% of the 104 respondents said there had been a decrease in ASB as a result of the partnership work and interventions which were put in place. In terms of the next priority, which was serious violence, we've provided and continue to provide evidence to support the police and other partners in relation to recent gang injunction, which has been in place in Basingstoke, and it's been in the press as well. And that's relevant to a particular cohort of individuals. We've supported the development of a wider partnership activity relating to youth violence and exploitation, and looked at some of the governance structures in place with that, with the Community Safety Partnership having some of the responsibility over that now, so sitting where it should, but also working closely with the Violence Reduction Unit. We also have a county-wide VORG strategy, which is violence against women and girls, which we've been working with, and there's also a local action plan as well, which we've helped contribute to. And some of the other things in relation to tackling serious violence and that priority, particularly we attend the Prevent Partnership Board and Channel Panel as well, which is in relation to stopping people becoming radicalised and where people have expressed extremism as well. Various safeguarding is in relation to that as well. We've got the OPMET, which is in relation to vulnerable young people, which we attend and contribute to, and there's other various police and children's services led operations as well, which we participate in. Going on to the third priority, crimes with low levels of reporting. So we have a really successful and well-attended domestic abuse forum in Basingstoke. So our community safety team help enable that, but that's very much a partnership and run activity which sits out underneath, I suppose, some of that CSP activity. And I know other colleagues in the other districts have similar things as well. Really, that's about bringing together partners which are involved in domestic abuse, and that's from not only statutory organisations but also the voluntary sector as well. And mainly that's around increasing awareness, shared campaigns and partnership work, and sharing best practice. And the forum's grown in attendance as well and developing, which is really positive. We've also got a hate crime working group in Basingstoke, so that's chaired by the voluntary sector, so Citizens Advice actually chair that. That's again formed of professional voluntary sector organisations, again raises awareness of hate crime, agree approaches to tackling hate crime locally. Lastly, I'll just quickly mention we've also got a current domestic homicide review which is being carried out in Basingstoke. I won't go into the details of it, but obviously that helps to review where a homicide has taken place as a result of domestic violence, and there is a responsibility on the Community Safety Partnership to review them, and then reports get submitted to the Home Office once that's complete, which we'll hopefully be in a place to do over the next year. I think that's everything from me, Chair.
Thank you, Daniel. If we begin with asking our colleagues from Basingstoke and Dean, elected members, whether they've got any questions. Remember, it's scrutiny here tonight on the report that Daniel was comprehensively presented. So anything from yourselves? Yeah, please do.
From my perspective, what I can see is that, you know, the work that you do is absolutely fantastic, but I think there needs to be more communication between individual wards, and I know that Debbie's team is absolutely brilliant, and her and I have liaised on a number of occasions, but, you know, what we're short of is feet on the ground, really, for Debbie and her team, and I really appreciate that. But, I mean, only today I've had a report from a resident whose child attends a school in South Ham with yet another serious incident of a child being assaulted by another child outside of the school. So I think I really applaud what you're doing with you know, youth offending. But I think we need more focus on protecting what's often vulnerable youths who are generally incendiary, moving this forward. Thank you.
To respond to that, yeah.
I can come back in. So yeah, that fits in with some work which we've got taking place at the moment and developing, and we've been working very closely with a range of partners, particularly with Alex at Yacht, Youth Offending Team, around developing the approach, and one of the things will be has been around recognising some of them risks. And some of that which is coming to the attention of us as organisations, and there's some further work which has been explored to hopefully tackle that. So hopefully when we're at this point next year, we'll have a bit more of an update in terms of some of the work which has gone on around kind of youth violence and exploitation as well, but definitely at the forefront of us as partners in terms of priorities for the partnership for the next year.
Any further questions from our Basingstoke? Yeah.
Less a question. I'd like to echo what Councillor Jeans has said, that the team does do good work. I'm a magistrate in the North Hampshire bench, so I've probably seen a broader cross-section of the crimes that happen in our borough more than anybody else, so to speak. It's eye-opening to see the horrific crimes go side by side with traffic offences. You know, that to me is the most prevalent crime, is people going 5 over the speed limit. But what I'd like to see, if possible, is more strongly worded recommendations from any party that can to the Borough Council, to the Police and Crime Commissioner, because I've had contact from residents that have said they'd rather walk 2 miles home to Popley than stay with a friend in the town centre, because they don't want to walk through the town centre at night because it's dangerous. It's quite a local issue, obviously, because that's the ward I represent, but from what I'm hearing, it's just not a nice place to be on a Saturday night. Well, any night really. Having the lights turned off overnight hasn't helped matters for people that finish late shifts and are walking home at 2 a.m. and there's no street lights, is obviously a catalyst to crime. So there's things that this committee and related bodies can do in terms of pushing the people who make the decisions to actually implement policies that will reduce crime.
Daniel.
Yeah, I can provide a little bit of a response in that, and I think it relating back to one of the priorities which links in with the crimes with historically low levels of reporting. And I think then we look at, whilst it's not solely related, violence against women and girls, sort of often referred to as VORG. There's been a lot of work which has taken place in relation to that, and I think there's some momentum picking up around that particular area of focus as well. And I think that very much links in with that feeling of safety, Interestingly, our speaker said about a survey which was carried out in a particular ward area, and whilst most people felt safe in the daytime, actually that result, and we would see that and probably expect to see that drop off slightly in the evening times or after dark. But it's what we can work to do as partners to look at that and address that issues, and feeling of safety is definitely something which as partners I think will formulate some of our priorities for the next year as well.
Thank you. Anything else from you two? Anything our partners want to ask about Basingstoke and Dean? Thank you very much. If I could ask a question. Social housing landlords, and my ignorance of Basingstoke, I don't know whether the council is still the landlord or you have Vivid or other. What's the relationship you have with social landlords?
Yeah, we have a really good working relationship with social landlords. I mean, we don't have our own housing stock at Basingstoke and Dean, so slightly different approach to some other areas. But we do have a very good partnership working relationship, and I'm sure some of our other partners as well also share them relationships where there is regular discussion from that. Certainly from kind of operational and tactical kind of perspective around things, as well as then for strategic planning and working together as well. But I know there is, good relationships which exist.
Okay. Before we close, any further questions to Basingstoke and Dean? Okay. We now move on to Hearts, which is page 33. Would you like to introduce that?
Hi. So I'll start with a lot of the kind of wider context subjects that Dan's already covered. We cover across all three areas. So attendance on Prevent Partnership Board, Modern Slavery Partnership, involvement in the violence against women and girls and all that sort of thing. We all kind of work towards those things. So rather than kind of repeating what Dan said, I'll just kind of say that from the offset. Going through the priorities then, looking at ASB, we did an awful lot of work last year around trying to raise awareness around ASP and trying to get the message out there for people to actually report ASB rather than just suffering in silence, because we found when we started to do more community engagement events, lots of people talked to us about things, and when we suggested that they report them, they had no idea that they could and they should, and that we could do things to help. And very often we found that they were very simple solutions, just about kind of putting people in touch with the right services, or even just giving advice to kind of talk to one another and just have those conversations made a huge difference. We took in 668 reports over the period that we're reporting on, which doesn't seem very many when I look at the Basingstoke and Dean figures, but we're a very different district council, we're a very different demographic, we're a different makeup, and we're a team of two that cover Heart, so we stretch ourselves fairly thinly over the numbers that come in. Most of those, I'm glad to say, that we are able to sort out within house, and the figure I gave in the report was 85%, which seems awfully high. But that's a lot of ongoing hand-holding and supporting for those people. That 15%, however, is absolutely partnership working, and we rely on so many of our partners here and as well the registered social landlords. Relationships are everything in the work that we do. Where we have good relationships and we can find solutions, and we can't always fix everything, but we can at least have those communications, get the right people in and kind of get those things going. So I'm really pleased to say in most of those situations we've managed to resolve issues, or at least kind of push them in the right direction. We've ended up with everything seems to have come in pairs for us through the year. So we've had 2 closure orders that we took to court and were successful with. We've had 2 antisocial behaviour injunctions that we took to court, we were successful with. And then we've ended up with 2 community triggers. So everything has kind of come in pairs for us this year. We have only taken to court what has absolutely had to go to court. Nobody wants enforcement where it's unnecessary, it's costly and it's time consuming. But in the situations that we've been faced with, we've shown that we've got enough evidence together and we're able to kind of take that through the process. And it's been we've really sort of tried to use that for positive communications, again, to get those messages out for people to report when they're suffering issues. We have great regular contacts with the neighbourhood policing teams. We have great regular contact, obviously, across the councils. I must say, kind of sort of internally as well. We forget that although we represent kind of our part of the councils, those kind of internal services, environmental health, parking, we're not a kind of a black and white service. We cover lots of the grey areas as well as kind of just our own area. We have a meeting across Hart and Rushmore, has always been called the Vulnerabilities Operational Group. We're looking to kind of shift and move that now. Moving on, we will be talking about people and places separately. So we've traditionally done the people meeting together, talking about, and that's where that kind of partnership working comes together. So we'll take particular cases, referrals from all over, from housing associations, from the neighbourhood policing team. And those are where really sort of situations have hit a brick wall, and we're looking for solutions in the room and an action plan, actually kind of what can we do with this situation rather than just sitting on it, because often, unfortunately, we see the same names kind of cycle around. It's looking for something different rather than kind of continuing to do the same thing and expecting a different outcome, trying to find different ways to get solutions there. We've done quite a lot of early intervention work, certainly kind of sending out ASB warning letters. We've worked really closely with the town centres where we've had issues, certainly in terms of kind of youth ASB, where there's been issues inside shopping centres. We've worked closely with the schools on that, and again, the neighbourhood policing team have been brilliant at kind of connecting all those dots together, at kind of pulling that together. And for the most part, we've had really positive responses from parents. Where we don't, then we have to kind of step up our response. But I'm really pleased to say that we've worked closely with housing associations where they also have then kind of supported us with that work. So that kind of covers off really our sort of our antisocial behaviour directly. I will say with the community triggers, interestingly, the visiting speaker spoke about vehicle ASB. That's been one of our community triggers, and has come really to a point where we have resolved that actually all that can be done currently as is being done by the partners at the table. But I'm hoping to take a little bit of kind of work and get some support with some work to go to Hampshire highways. In certain situations, I know kind of changing the roads isn't going to be a practical option everywhere and always, but certainly there will be some situations where a little bit of target hardening might kind of in the long term sort of make some difference. So that's our kind of community triggers. In terms of the serious violence, including knife, blade and offence and robbery, most of our work really has been around awareness raising. We've done an awful lot of work with schools and youth clubs. We've brought an interactive experience to the secondary schools to try and just sort of introduce the topic of exploitation to children. We hit some degree of reservation, I think, from schools who didn't want us to talk to children in the kind of lower years, but we really pushed that actually if you can send that messaging out as early as possible, it's where you plant the seed, and we can hope to sort of encourage conversation around things. So that's been really positive. And we've also had that engagement with local youth groups. We're lucky enough to have 2 proactive youth groups in our district, and both of them have engaged in that process. Again, as Dan said, we work closely with Children's Services team with OPMET, so that's about kind of identifying those individuals before they kind of hopefully they get picked up, before they become high risk, before they're already ensconced. It's about trying to prevent that behaviour and the risk increasing. And then in terms of crimes with low reporting, we have a Hart and Rushmore Domestic Abuse Forum. We're running that quarterly now. Again, we have good attendance. We have some great speakers. It's very much about information sharing between us and sharing of best practice and networking, actually. You know, we talk about kind of relationships between us and other partners. One of the main functions of that forum is for those other partners that work within domestic abuse to network and meet with one another, because often we'll get kind of connections made in the room that mean that they can go on to further work and support one another. So that's been a really useful tool for us. And we commissioned a project last year with Fleet Phoenix, based in Fleet but covers all of Hart District, called Resilience Against Domestic Abuse, which offers junior school children one-to-one and group work. So they are children who have been witness to or victim of domestic abuse in the home. So it offers them a series of therapeutic work to help them come to terms with and help them work through what they've seen, in the aim obviously of trying to kind of break that cycle of domestic abuse. They've had, I think, 7 families. They're just about to sign up an 8th, and they've had some amazing feedback, kind of really sort of seeing a difference, getting the feedback from the schools, getting the feedback from the families on what a difference it's made. So that's been a really great project to be a part of. And in terms of hate crime, we did an awful lot of work around Hate Crime Awareness Week. Again, we'll use often kind of those awareness weeks for communications to go out, just to kind of get messages out around being socially inclusive, about tolerance, and also about getting the message out, much like with the antisocial behaviour, that it's not okay to sort of sit and accept something. You shouldn't accept that. It's it should be reported so that we can do something about it. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, another very comprehensive report. So our Hart colleagues, Councillor Butcher and Councillor Wildsmith, the floor is yours if you'd like to ask some question or raise some points.
Yeah, so first I'll thank you for the report. It's very detailed and very good, and I want to also thank you for the effort you put in over the last few years. You can really see the impact, the positive impact that's been made on the ground floor in some of the areas, particularly around Elveston Heath. We are currently seeing the new generation of the kids coming through and starting to misbehave in the usual manner. There is a general feeling that it's now been moved from Eltham Heath and is now affecting the areas in Fleet Central and in Councillor Wildsmith's area at Ansell's Farm as well. And I think we would benefit from some increased focus in those areas now, because we're seeing increased incidents of late night ASB behaviour. And there is also a general feeling amongst the people in Fleet, whilst we are blessed with having a relatively low crime rate in general, what does happen then is gets greater awareness, I think, in many ways, and there is a feeling that there is almost a futility of trying to report because of the difficulty in reporting, particularly using the 101 service. So the work is appreciated, but it's the difficulty in reporting means that a lot of, I think, crimes are being unreported as such.
Yeah, I think we tend to advise everyone now not really to call 101, but to report online, and that takes a little while to get that message out. There's also a QR code available that people can just sort of scan on their phone to be able to kind of record directly, and that's been much more successful. A, you're not waiting for ages to hang on the line, and B, you're not then subject to someone's interpretation maybe of your answer to the questions when you get through. So I think that kind of hopefully will make a big difference. We definitely would just encourage report in the easiest and quickest way possible, but also we have the antisocial behaviour form on the council site, and we would gladly, if there's a particular hotspot, we will certainly work with the PCSOs that cover the area, and we've done in a couple of other areas. Like we had a problem out at Crondall, so we did a community meeting. If there's that feeling that that would be necessary or that would provide some assurance, then we will always do that.
Kirsten, did you want to come in and talk about the QR code or the quicker way of reporting?
I thought I'll come in and talk about reporting, because obviously it's the conversation that probably be the same one amongst Basingstoke, Hart and Rushmore. So a number of different aspects to it, and as Rachel refers, I think just having a variety of different mechanisms to suit different people is the most effective way of doing it. Having a QR code now that enables people that do have mobile phones and that would find it easier to report that way online, which I know would be attractive to some people but not to everybody in the community, being able to scan the QR code and then go to a landing page that allows you then to report information around risk or harm that's concerning you, report information about antisocial behaviour, or to report a crime. And it'll also take you to the Street Safe Home Office browser as well, which will allow you to report where you might feel vulnerable as a woman or girl, or from a family member about places where you feel unsafe, where you think actually we need some target hardening in a particular locality, a back alley, that type of scenario. So I think access using the QR code is really helpful. There's a lot of force work with our contact management service, heavily emphasised by the Police and Crime Commissioner around the 101 service and the efforts to improve. We know it's not right. We know it doesn't deliver the service it needs to for our communities. And there's a real appetite to take that forward and make sure that we try and improve that. What I would say in the meantime is I would ask the councillors, and I know I've had councillors like Mr Dibble, I think, testing the QR and the reporting through the Tell Us About It site and seeing how easy it is to go on there and do that. So as councillors, I'd really appreciate you coming up with something that you need to report to us, testing it out and seeing how easy it is, and then helping us by being the voice to encourage communities to report online. Because that will really help free up the 101 service, especially for people that don't have that access to online reporting, and make that service a less of a wait time for those people that don't use online.
Yeah, never one to ignore what Kirsten tells me. I did try it and it was much easier, much easier. Councillor Wildsmith, have you? Fine.
Yes.
Over to you.
Yeah. I suppose in a way it's a little bit worrying because we seem to get the same hotspots. We can probably pretty much guarantee within the next 2 months across LV from Heath, people will be setting fires again because it happens every year. Ansell's Farm, every year around summertime, we get the antisocial behaviour bits around there. It just seems odd that it happens year on year, but when we don't seem to expect it to happen, although it's happened for the last 10, 15 years sort of going on. So I'd say probably slightly as a negative point. On another point, we've obviously said we've had 668 reports of antisocial behaviour. It'd actually be quite nice to see a breakdown of what sort of antisocial behaviour that is, because if you go online or reports from residents, or an issue happens, it's youths who have caused it. Yet in the earlier pages, we state actually youth antisocial behaviour is only 20% of the overall. So actually most antisocial behaviour is actually being conducted by adults and not young people. So we're actually giving people a false impression of young people. We're making people then scared because they see a group of young people, and then that's that perceived antisocial behaviour. I'm not going to go near them because it's a group of young people. Well, actually, you're probably better going near them than you are going back near that group of 30, 40-year-olds, because statistically, you're probably more likely to get a problem. It's just worrying we seem to keep painting young people in a bad light, which doesn't help them, and then we're maybe not tackling the correct areas because we put focus on youth antisocial behaviour because people keep moaning about it. Well, actually, are we doing them a bit of injustice there?
I couldn't agree with you more. It's one of my points of real championing that we should not demonise our young people. And if ever you come to one of my sort of stand on a soapbox and rant about it, my first advice generally for people who have concerns about groups of youths is just say hello when you wander past. Make eye contact, make them feel like part of your community, because actually a lot of the issues I think are created by that sort of that fear of them. So I really couldn't agree with you more on that. I guess we do focus a lot on youngsters though, because we know with antisocial behaviour that it can be a sort of a precursor if it's not picked up early. That's why we work so much with early intervention work. If we can get in early and we can get parents aware of what's going on, then we can really make a difference, because we're then kind of taking that wraparound approach to what's going on. But yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. I do think we do need to think about the way we put the statistics out, and I'm glad to say we have a new system of recording at heart now for our reports coming in, so I would be able to kind of do more of a breakdown. I would say most of our antisocial behaviour reports are definitely not youth related, certainly not in a kind of a majority. There's a big majority our neighbour, and there's also an awful lot that comes to us that isn't maybe necessary, or maybe didn't start out as antisocial behaviour, but because it got left, it became antisocial behaviour. So yeah, no, I would agree with you, and wherever we can sort of work on that, we definitely will.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Wildsmith or Butcher?
Yes, just had one other bit. It was on the bit which seems slightly worrying that you said on schools and the younger age groups they didn't want you going talking in. Were we referring to secondary schools there?
Yeah, so we'd offer a Think Safe opportunity for Year 6 students, which we're currently doing at the moment. But we've been doing in Hart Stay Safe, which is offered to Years 7, 8 and 9. And we've been trying to encourage the schools to engage with year 7s and 8s just to get the messaging in early. And I think a lot of them were afraid because the topic is exploitation. What we see is that children of younger ages will kind of get drawn into that. So we want to get those messages through before rather than after the horse has bolted. So, yeah.
I'm just saying, mate, it's very concerning if a school doesn't realise that year 7s and 8s and even year 6s are at that level already. That is slightly disturbing. We've got schools at that level. We've got our eldest is 8, and there's probably certain things he picks up off YouTube that we're like, what are you going on about? And I think children know things a lot earlier. So I'm very, very concerned. We've got presumably head teachers in those departments in the schools in our area which aren't really up to date with what young people are doing nowadays, and would be something we'd definitely like seeing addressed. And my only other point was on the online reporting on the 101. I don't know if it's changed in the last maybe couple of years. I know last time I tried reporting it, I nearly gave up. I ended up ringing 101 and holding on because the question in some parts were so ambiguous, I wasn't quite sure what to put where, that I was like, I'm going to speak to someone because otherwise it's going to come across completely the wrong way. If it hasn't changed, I think it's almost needing to sit down with people who aren't related to it whatsoever and get them to write the form so it's for general publics saying what they need to sort of say and then tailor it in from there.
More expert knowledge.
Yeah,
Scott, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think these are really valid points. I had some involvement on the project of our single online home, which is the obviously our website which includes the reporting of crime. And over the last few years, that platform has matured. There are additional modules now for reporting ASB and other things. I think if your reference point was a couple of years ago, there have been improvements to it since. I'm not going to say it's necessarily perfect for every scenario, but it is a lot better. So we would, and as Kirsten said, we really advocate reporting it because we'd rather have, even if we're not in a position to deploy a unit to it or respond to it, having it logged online and understanding the picture that's reviewed by our neighbourhood teams is better than a lost call at 101 after a number of minutes when at peak times, as you rightly say, that the call time waiting can be longer because we will naturally prioritise the treble 9 calls. And I worked as a forced incident manager in the control room, so I have that lens of understanding that balance between resourcing and treble 9s versus 101. There is a trade-off. It's the same sort of contact handlers who are handling them. So the online reporting is valuable on so many levels, as Kirsten said.
Councillor Whitefield, I'd say have a chat with Kirsten and Scott afterwards because the fast track is much simpler. You're not asked what your mother-in-law's favourite dish was at primary school and such things. So,
one final thing, Chair, I'd say is all on it. I think one thing probably councillors from all three authorities here and across all wards, if they report something and it feels like they might as well not bother because they don't know what happens, I think that's something probably worth taking up going forward, because if you want things to be reported to build up a picture, people like to know when you've reported it, but there's been some outcome or it's been logged. So if computer systems allow over time for it happens, people can get an update on it, or just they know that it has been logged, it's building up a picture. So even if it's just a couple of months later saying, we know you contacted us about this, although we weren't dealing with it directly, it is informing our whole picture. Just people actually, it's that sort of keep getting with touch points in there, so people actually think it is worthwhile reporting.
And I couldn't agree more. And I think the way forward that it's been agreed, and our PCC is supportive of this, is that everyone will get an update on the reports that come in, and that should be by either a neighbourhood team or through contact management after the event to let you know that it has, as you say, been logged. So that should be happening.
Kirsten.
Thanks. The other thing to add is recently we started a police engagement newsletter thing to go out to the councillors, and I'm happy it goes out to the public as well. And that's to kind of look at some of the thematics of what we've been dealing with, some of the themes, look at some of the results, so that those things that have happened over the last 1 or 2 months, then at least we can then kind of give you some kind of summary as to what's been going on, and a conversation and more connectivity with the neighbourhood teams as well, with the sergeants talking about what's been concerning them, what they've been dealing with and things like that. And I think that will help as well for that feedback loop. That two-way engagement, that two-way communication is one of the things that is absolutely central to the Hart and Rushmore Police business plan in order for us to deliver that you said we did kind of and really get that feedback loop well with the councillors and with the public, with that communication, and others through the PCSOs and through Facebook and Twitter as well. So yeah, we really get how important that is to you and to the community. Thanks, Chair.
Any further questions, Councillor Wilde-Smith?
I think there's been probably a lot of criticism, just finishing a point, but obviously the Facebook, who you've ever got doing with Facebook and the Hart area now is doing a fantastic job. I mean, before you'd hardly ever see anything, whereas now it's light-hearted at times as well. It's quite nice. I suppose the best example of police force I want to look at is Kingston Police Force. If they want to know how to do Facebook, they're absolutely hilarious over what they do on it. But it's that sort of thing that keeps people engaged. So, no, good work on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our professional colleagues, any questions or points you want to make?
Sorry, I just wanted to come back on the schools, just to let you know, since we put together the report for this. So our Think Safe, I think we had 19 schools engage across Hart this year. And with the help of our colleagues in the neighbourhood policing team, we now have all 5 of the secondary schools engaged with the Stay Safe. So sometimes it was just about kind of getting to speak to the right person and getting that message across. But yeah, I'm delighted to say all 5 now engaged.
Okay, thank you. David.
Just jumping in on the Think Safe project, and we organised that across Hart and Rushmore as well, and as part of it this year we have engaged the Willow team who work with the County Council to do a very light touch sort of 10-minute quick session on exploitation, and so that will actually be targeting Year 6 pupils just as they're leaving school before they're going into Year 7, and that's the first. We haven't done Think Safe for a number of years now because of COVID. This is the first year we've done it since 2019 now, and so it will be interesting how that session goes down and the feedback we get from the teachers, but hopefully that's another positive side to that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on now to Rushmore. Now, many of us here think Rushmore is the centre of the earth, the most important place, and those of you who have gone through all the report will notice that the Rushmore report was duplicated. But we're only going to focus on the report that starts at page 37 and not page 45. So, Mr. Lipscombe.
Thank you, Councillor Dibble. Back to me, unfortunately for you, and I think I definitely get the rum deal by going last out of the 3 local authorities who all do fairly similar work. But I shall try and focus on some key points that I wanted to highlight, really good work we've done in the past 12 months. And I might just go back to the VOG meeting, which is the Vulnerabilities Operational Group, which will be morphing into the People meeting, or already has now. And just that's such a key bit of work every month that we do in partnership with Hart Council, but also the police and other partners as well, including the housing associations, local support charities, around drugs and alcohol, and adult services and children's services as well. It gives partners the opportunity to refer into that meeting if there's a particular individual they're really concerned about. We'll take a look at it, we'll all sit around the table, discuss the issues, and as Rachel said, action plan from that. But as well as referrals, we also look at police data each month around topics such as domestic abuse, hate crime, repeat callers, linking into some of that underreported crime as well. And we probably have a couple of new referrals each month on that meeting for probably Rushmore and the Hart area. Sometimes they'll stay on for a couple of months. Sometimes it might be longer, but that's until we feel that we've done everything we can to manage that person, and it might be that they're then referred on to another group, or we feel that we have had a successful outcome there. Neighbour nuisance is highlighted on the priority as well, and sort of similarly since COVID, it really shot up in terms of the complaints about neighbour nuisance we've got, and it's not gone back down since, sadly. Cannabis as part of that is a particular problem for us in terms of neighbours reporting their neighbours smoking cannabis, whether that's in private properties or housing association properties. Something really positive that we have at Rushmore is a cannabis warning process where we work with the housing associations and the police. If we get reports in, we'll take a look at them and assess the whole situation, as sometimes it might not be quite so clear cut, but we have a warning letter process through that, which is extremely effective. And the vast majority of the time, if one warning letter is sent to an individual about their cannabis smoking that's disturbing neighbours, we then don't get any further complaints about it. If we do get further complaints, it then proceeds to a second warning letter, and if it still carries on, then we look to use utilise some of our tools and powers like a community protection notice, which will then actually have some formal sanctions if they continue to do so. We've been really fortunate over the past year that we've been able to utilise our community patrolling officers more than we have previously in terms of dispatching them to hotspot areas for community visibility and community reassurance, but also intelligence gathering. I know there have been a number of intelligence reports that they've submitted to the police from being out and about that have actually led to some really positive outcomes for police. As I say, that was in the past year a relatively new thing we've been doing, and I think there were 62 patrols carried out during that period. In Rushmore, we've refreshed our community trigger process, which is something that's often confusing for residents. They're not sure what it does, who's reported to, and what the threshold is. So it's been highlighted by the Victims Commissioner as a really valuable tool for residents if they feel that something isn't happening with their case they've complained about. So we've made sure in Rushmore our process is really very clear, it's published on the website, and in fact we've had a community trigger which did come in within the last year we're looking at, and it's now been resolved. We did some really great partnership working with the police and Vivid Housing Association on that. It's resulted in court action, and it's resulted in a number of neighbours feeling a lot happier about their neighbourhood than they otherwise would be. I can't let it go by without talking about car meets, because we've touched on them a few times today, and I'm hoping that being smug about it isn't going to come back and bite me, but we were having significant problems with car meets in Rushmore. Again, some great partnership working with the police in terms of some of their response in the evening locally, but also some target hardening that we've done. It was very much happening in some of our council-owned car parks, because in Rushmore we've got some large, open-air, big car parks. We had events where there were thousands of people, 500 cars, thousands of people. We've taken some steps there by spending relatively minor amounts of money to target harden, mainly around gates. Fortunately, the other business parks around the areas have all done the same as well, and the security on those large car parks is much improved. And we've get the odd report, and I know that there was something on some of the MOD land a few weeks ago actually, but a relatively minor event. But I'd say that's been a really good success, and I'm hoping. So sorry to Basingstoke and everyone else but you can keep them for now.
You pushed it our way.
That's the thing that happens. You need to decide where you're going to push it next. So, we started a process to implement a public space protection order in the last year in relation to issues in Aldershot town centre. I'm sure you're probably familiar with complaints we get around drunken behaviour, which can often turn violent, but also lead to abuse of residents, and it can be quite an intimidating place to walk through. We're very much of the opinion it's not acceptable. So a public spaces protection order will give us some extra power to deal with that from the police side of things, but also from our community patrolling officers as well, who will be able to issue fixed penalty notices for certain behaviours and also confiscate alcohol from individuals if they feel they are acting in an antisocial manner. That's been quite a long process to get in, and it's recently been approved by the Cabinet, and we'll be hoping to start enforcement on that next month as well, but we'll keep you updated about that. It's been mentioned about fear of crime in particular, and I know that that's an issue that comes up in Rushmore. It's not something I've done in the last year, but it's something that I think is relevant taking forward. I'm very much going to be developing a survey for residents on community safety issues that we're going to try and get out as far and wide as we can. Is it something that quite a few years ago used to be done a bit more often, hasn't been done for years, and I think we really need to get a picture of how residents are feeling, what their issues are, and what more we can be doing to help them. The idea is to repeat that every year once it's in place, so we get a baseline and we can monitor it over the years as well. So I think that may well assist in some of that, and I'm happy to talk to my colleagues in Basingstoke and Rushmore about what they're doing, whether there's anything we can share on that front. So there's all some positive things. One thing I'd mention that I think is probably not so positive, that I'm always banging on about, is youth work. Is Hart are really fortunate. They've got a couple of really big youth organisations who are doing some great work in the area. Rushmore's last main youth organisation that did cover the a wider area closed a number of years ago, and we've not really had anything to replace it. There's small youth clubs here and there and pockets of work being done, but nothing really coordinated across either Farnborough or Aldershot, especially in terms of detached youth work. I think it's something that's sorely lacking and would be really valuable. We keep having lots of the discussions about it. It's not something that's easy to solve in terms of funding, in terms of finding someone to come in and run something like that. It's something I will continue to go on about and talk to my colleagues about as well. But anything that members may want to do to assist in that and encourage that along, especially with the regeneration that we're having in Aldershot Town Centre and Farnborough, potentially there's some prime opportunities to use space within that regeneration to move some of that work forward. In terms of serious violence, I think again that's very much that partnership approach, and I won't talk about it for too long, but we've on a number of partnership meetings in terms of the Hampshire Violence Reduction Unit with a number of other councils, Basingstoke, Rushmore as well. We've just recently had a very detailed problem profile which will be drilling down into more in terms of our local area of where the real issues are and what we need to be targeting. Locally, we've also established, mainly through my manager James Knight and Kirsten Troman, a high harm reduction group, which is a multi-agency tactical group, trying to explore and discuss and agree how we're going to tackle those issues that have been identified by the Violence Reduction Unit, and also in our annual strategic assessment, and hopefully it will allow us to, be held more accountable and to make sure we are targeting what we need to in respect of that. It's also been mentioned the violence against women and girls. Locally, we get the data through about that. I then sit there, have a look through it, what's been reported, and actually what can be done about some of those issues. So whether it's about lighting in an underpass or Hampshire County Council street lighting, which comes up very regularly in terms of not being turned on, and then try and pass those messages on and try and take some action where it is possible. And we've also got the joint VORG plan between Basingstoke and Rushmore, which is something Rachel and Kirsten worked very hard on, is currently in draft and will hopefully finalise shortly. Domestic homicide reviews is something we're also responsible for, and in the past year we have had an application for a domestic homicide review. We did some really thorough work on it and decided that it wasn't something that should be taken forward and fed that back to the Home Office. We're currently still in discussion with the Home Office about that one, but it does take quite a while for them to look at all the facts that we pulled together. But I can update you on that as and when it drags on even further. In terms of low reporting issues, I've obviously talked about the BOG and some of the things we look at in that. Rachel's touched on the Domestic Abuse Forum and stolen my thunder there, so I won't talk about that too much. And again, the key communications through our comms team throughout the year, such as White Ribbon Day and Social Behaviour Week, mental health awareness, just really raising the profile with our residents about some of those key issues and just encouraging them to have more knowledge, encouraging reporting and support they might be able to provide their friends and family. And safeguarding training as well. It's something that's more internal, but we have a real comprehensive programme of safeguarding training that Rachel and I run together, so we cover both Hart and Rushmore councils on that, ensuring that members and all staff are regularly trained, I say face-to-face, but teams to teams, on those safeguarding issues and what they need to be looking out for, how they can support customers and residents, and also in their own personal life. And I think, again, that's just spreading that information around some of those key topics that people need to be aware of. I've probably spoken for long enough. I'm conscious we've got lots more partners to go through, so please, any questions?
Thank you, David. Councillor Jeffers and Councillor Bedford, over to you. Lee, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Chairman. Hi, David. Thank you for your report. The point I'm going to make this evening is really about how the partnership works and how it records data. Now, SafetyNet used to be the partnership working database, and somewhere along the line in the past that has disappeared. So how has that impacted, good or negative, how has that impacted the partnership working? Where are you now recording those information, especially on the plan around antisocial behaviour? How are you reviewing it, and how do you know which and what partnerships, what partners are doing on those issues? Thank you, Chairman.
I think, yeah, SafetyNet has been gone for a number of years. I think most people around the table are probably pleased about that. It had its benefits, but yeah, we're without it currently. I would say it's not had a significant impact on partnership working by any means, because we have such strong partnerships. We know who we need to talk to about issues. If a complaint comes in and we think, oh, police are going to be aware of that, housing associations are too, it's just send an email around, this has come in, what are we doing? Do we need to get together to talk about it and put a plan in place? Yeah, okay, brilliant. It's really not a concern, I think, that's gone, because, as I say, the partnership working so good. In terms of where we're recording it now, we've moved on to the uniform database within Rushmore Borough Council, which, yeah, is quite new within the team, so we're getting used to it, and hopefully next year we'll be able to pull some useful data out of it in terms of some mapping and some statistics on reports. I think with antisocial behaviour, though, it's not always easy to record absolutely everything that does come into us, because we get such a large amount. And some stuff, sort of Rachel's alluded to, I think that we won't always actually look at, because it's not necessarily for us. It might be a crime issue, which, whilst we'll be aware of on the periphery, is really for police to deal with. So it's making sure that what we record is accurate and is stuff that, generally the stuff that goes on there is things that we are actively working on. But
in relation then to planning ahead around antisocial behaviour issues, those things that happen year in, year out, is there a way then for your patrol officers that they can sit down, review and plan and say, right, we're going up to Halloween, we're going to have issues here and here. Summer, we're going to have issues here and here. Does that system have that information where they can actually plan ahead to resolve those issues so they don't happen again?
I'm not sure whether that system specifically has that at the moment, because as I say, it's all quite new to us still. But I would say that I think we're aware of key dates throughout the year, Halloween, bonfire night, and we'll put in place things to tackle that. We have operational orders for summer holidays, for Easter holidays, and we know what our hotspots are. So within the parks, within the town centres. Very quickly, we generally have an issue in Hawley Woods most summers around fires and antisocial behaviour. It's actually in Herts area, but it's something that happens each summer, and we actually have a bit of a partnership group that get together, talk about the issues, and we've done that again recently because we know it was a problem last summer. We know already there are issues down there this summer, but it's something we're talking about already. We all met down on site a number of weeks ago as well. So again, I think the benefit of partnership working being so good is that I'd say we're on top of it.
Councillor Bedford.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, David. A couple of things really that bother me as much as anything is with the 101. I know it's been mentioned before, but I've spoken to people who've rung me to say, Councillor Bedford, we've got so-and-so happening in the ward. We tried ringing 101 and we put the phone down because they can't wait. And it might be a minor thing. It could be damage to their car or somebody's knocked a flower pot over and they're just angry about it. So that is a problem, I think, that lots of people aren't reporting things because they can't actually get through. So they tend to be reporting to me, too late, of course. But also, you're talking about antisocial behaviour. That's never going to go away. We're always going to have it. We had it when I was a child, which was hundreds of years ago. So it's something we have to sort of deal with, and I think they are seasonal. And as my colleague said here, there are times of the year like fireworks, that sort of thing, you're going to have a bit of trouble. So I think it's just trying to keep a bit of a pulse on that one. The other thing I would say, in praise of our local, I'm from St Mark's Ward in Farnborough, our local PCSOs, I have walkabouts with them, which I find quite educational, actually, because they teach me things, and I think I teach them things, because we can share our knowledge. They take me to areas that I didn't know there was a problem, and vice versa. We also have, and I'm sure the Garrison Commander knows this, and we have the hub meetings, which is once a month in Ramillies Park, which is really useful. Lots of people are there, but the police are always there, the PCSOs are always there. I try to go as often as I can. I can't always go, but it's well worth anybody who's in that area to go and have a little visit and have a chat, because they've got all sorts of other people visit, housing and so on. So these are lots of things where they've got problems with issues that I think are worth visiting. I think that's probably all, actually, but I would like to praise the PCSOs, because I found them incredibly useful and helpful to me. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. And I would say, if you do have your residents reporting to you about particular issues that they aren't reporting to the police, please do, pass on to me, but also please always bang that drum around the importance of reporting. We know it can be frustrating, but use these new methods, the online reporting tool, the QR code. And in terms of police beat surgeries, yep, I'm fully supportive of them. We do try and attend some of them when we can. If there's a more high-profile issue in an area, we'll make a real effort to do. However, with a team of me and one other in the community safety team, we can't go to all of them, because otherwise we'd never get anything else done, because there are quite a lot. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, wearing my Rushmore hat, a couple of questions. Knife crime has been raised by our colleagues in Aldershot Park, and there have been incidents there with the underpass, which we crossed the county boundary from Hampshire to Surrey, or from Rushmore into Guildford Borough Council. And I know that Basingstoke and Dean Hart will also have boundaries with other authorities, but how does that partnership working develop, or is there a partnership?
I think in reference to that particular issue, down in Aldershot Park and the Tongham Underpass in particular, at first when that came together it was a bit tricky, but I had some great feedback the other day from one of Kirsten's officers that the partnership working with the neighbouring forces has massively improved, and that they're all actually getting together more regularly to share, details on things they need to share. And also from our perspective, we've then been dealing with neighbouring borough councils and the parish councils as well across the border. So yeah, it's improved contacts, and I think that's, going really well.
And did you briefly want to mention the success of the Cambridge Road closure?
Well, yeah, back to antisocial behaviour, just very briefly. In the past year, we did also have a successful closure of a property where there was significant antisocial behaviour, which was causing a huge impact on one family in particular. And their relief when we achieved that was insurmountable, and the feedback was really amazing. So,
any further questions? No. Thank you. Before we move on to the police contributions, I'm going to slightly break the protocol, because we do have the three portfolio holders here, and I just wonder if any of you wanted to make a brief comment. Certainly, we'll start with you, Basingstoke and Dean. Anything you want to brief comment? Remember that.
Yes, thanks. I'm not known for long speeches, so you're welcome. I've only been part of this partnership for a couple of meetings, and I would like to make two comments, really. One is, it's very impressive, the partnership working that goes across the three patches. I think it's fantastic. Having said that, one of the things that has been mentioned quite a bit in discussions, but is less, I think, prominent in the reports, is the work around domestic abuse and violence against women and girls. And, with we've got surveys coming in telling us that people in Basingstoke feel safe in the day, not in the evening. We have definitely rising domestic abuse cases, and some really nasty violence against women
going on. So I think there is a need for us. I think Daniel said, this is something that we need to be tackling in Basingstoke, but I think we do as a partnership need to be taking this very seriously, I think, and start to think about what we can do to help women and actually all people to feel safer at night, especially with the winter coming around. I think there is definitely the evidence coming through that we might need to tackle that. But yes, I have a lot of confidence in the group, and I would like to thank everybody for all the work that they do together to help us feel safe, and especially our CSPOs who have their feet definitely in our communities. And I think there's a lot of confidence being built up between our communities, the CSPOs, and then coming into our professional partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bailey from Hart, do you want to make a short contribution?
Pressing the red button here. Yes, just to build on the comment about domestic abuse, I know it's one of the priorities of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and I guess that will be reflected in the priorities shown throughout Hampshire and hopefully in each of the local areas. This was my first year where community safety formed part of my portfolio, so I've been on quite a steep learning curve. But the thing that has really impacted me is the benefit of how well the various partners work together, and the benefit of that one partner working with another partner gets so much more in terms of the results that we get, and also the strength of having a slightly different focus in each of the authorities, because again that's something we've moved back to in real terms in the last 12 to 18 months, so that what is being delivered does reflect the needs of the different authorities, and the characteristics are different across the different parts of North Hampshire.
Councillor Bailey, it was a great pleasure to invite my sparring pal of many years, Councillor Sheehan. And Maurice, if you could give us an update on where we are on the purchase of the mobile CCTV.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. I think first of all, I should thank you for reminding me about Cambridge Road, which was a very live issue within my own ward. I guess in the peace and tranquility since the closure, I'd actually forgotten about the issue. So thank you for that timely reminder. Can I also just highlight the comments from David also about car meets? I was listening very sympathetically to the councillor there on the problems that they were having. It was a huge issue in Farnborough, about 12 months ago, but with some joined up intelligence and some partnership working, we were able to resolve that relatively quickly, I would say. I guess we were in the fortunate position that it was within an area which was within the council's ownership, and therefore putting in some of the secure measures, and also some of our officers into the area as well to control that was a great success. The CCTV contract moves forward apace, but there have been some delays there. But yes, it is still very much the focus of our attention in bringing that forward. I think the one message that I get very clearly from this evening is about early intervention. And just how important that is, and of course, early intervention often is the cheaper option than the resultant problem when it gets out of hand. And I can't help thinking that we've heard about issues with young people this evening. That it was a number of years ago now that the county council abolished the youth service there. Which I expressed an opinion at the time that I thought was extremely short-sighted. I just wonder whether it's perhaps time that we as politicians actually asked our colleagues down at the county council to review that policy. That not only was there the advantage of the diversionary taxes that they could use to divert young people's attention away, or to more positive outcomes rather than the negatives ones we do, but it also gave time for the professional youth workers to actually talk to young people about the very perception that we oldies have of large groups of youths gathered on our street corners, and actually, just adjusting some of their behaviour can seem less intimidating to us as well. So I think with that thought, perhaps, Chairman, I'll leave you there.
District, but yes. Lots of things, that's good. First of all, I'd just like to put on record my thanks for the extremely warm welcome that I've had amongst all the CSP partners, local councillors and politicians. It's been great to be back in Basingstoke, and it's good to be here. In terms of the crime position, as we've heard, crime rates generally, this is a national thing, have returned to the sort of broadly pre-COVID rates. However, in Basingstoke, we're actually still down by 5.1% compared with a forced increase of 7.6%. So we're actually sort of just beneath the overall trend, which is a positive. We have over the last year seen, as has been touched on, big reductions in our most serious violence, which was a result of a lot of the work done by Basingstoke District and the High Harm team in particular in obtaining the gang injunction. Everyone in the room will be aware of the horrendous incident 6 weeks ago where there was a murder related to that gang. There's some outstanding work with police partners, both in response to and subsequent to that, in managing that incident. We are conscious overall around outcomes, what we call our formal outcomes, in common with the rest of the force, are down a little. Our out-of-court disposals are up. So there is a balance there, and we are continuing to monitor that week by week through channels in force. Overall, in Basingstoke, almost all of our crime classifications, whether that's assaults, damage, fraud, etc., are within what we call our control limits. There are very few that are in exception, which we need to really understand why. The few that are, we've seen ASB just creeping up, albeit from lower reporting levels. We've already touched on the importance of getting that report in, so that the reports we get reflect what's happening out on the streets. We have seen some vehicle crime starting to go up. I think that has started to be linked to some of the austerity that we are seeing. We're seeing a lot of offences, a little series of theft of fuel. It's getting that expensive. Theft of number plates, which also be used to facilitate related crime. Quite difficult to tackle. A lot of it is in our rural wards, something that we're actively monitoring through our daily management meetings. And also some minor increases in some sexual offences, but there's no pattern to that at all. And again, the numbers are actually extremely low. In terms of our priorities, they remain the same around tackling serious youth violence, around county lines and drug-related harm and domestic abuse, and obviously antisocial behaviour, which we've largely touched upon, having come into the district again, seeing some really good work around that. I won't repeat what I've said around what we term opchromium, which is our response to the car meets. That work goes on. I'll move on to the serious youth or serious violence, including knife and robbery crimes. These are a priority for us. We've seen the street gang injunction give real results in terms of reducing the robberies and knife-enabled crime by a massive chunk, sort of about 40 to 50% reductions, accepting the serious incident 6 weeks ago. We are redoubling our efforts, conscious of the void that can be filled when 3 key nominals are taken out of such a group, and then potentially the related threat and risk that can emerge between the various factions involved. That's something that we are actively, is probably our biggest priority in Basingstoke District right now. We have touched on domestic abuse briefly. I've had in a number of previous roles, quite a wide experience around domestic abuse. I've got a meeting next week with a number of key individuals from my team and partners to look at our DA response and how we support partners and efforts, particularly our MARIC meetings and other tactics. And I'm going to be bringing some experience I had doing some of that work in Portsmouth previously, and just giving a fresh set of eyes to what we do in Basingstoke, and I'm looking forward to that. Likewise, with hate crime, I'm pleased to see that the hate crime working group exists in Basingstoke. That's a passion that I've had for many years. In fact, by luck, I suppose, Kirky, isn't it really? I co-chair the LGBT plus resource group for Hampshire and Slattery with Kirky, and hate crime is a mainstay of the work that we do at a force level with that. And so I'm really looking forward to bringing some of that additional expertise into Basingstoke around that as well. So that is that, and I think that, in terms of Basingstoke, is all from me. Just a brief overview of our priorities. Possibly if anyone has any questions, I'll be delighted to.
Thank you very much, Scott. To colleagues from Basingstoke, any questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. It's really nice to meet you. I hope that we'll get to know one another quite well. Sorry. In Basingstoke we have a number of issues. Obviously, we're a busy town centre, but we're also a town centre that's very closely connected to London, and as such we have huge issues, as you're well aware, with county lines. My concern is with young people who are vulnerable, young people who are being sort of dragged into a life of crime in relation to county lines. That's really concerning. The number of youths that we're seeing carrying knives is phenomenal. The incident I referred to earlier, actually, they were youths carrying knives. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on the stop and search policies that we have here. And just as a side note, just two little things, one of which is what support are we giving to institutions who are taking people straight from prison, and the issues that they may bring with them. For instance, if we need to put them into B&Bs, a local police informed, and also community support officers who do a fabulous job, and they're always out on the street. And the bane of my life is electric scooters. Well, we see them all day, every day. What are we doing? Actually, we do lots of publicity around it is illegal to ride your electric scooter on the street, and it may seem a minor, petty issue, but what are we doing to stop people? Thank you.
Yeah, obviously quite a few things there. I mean, just to touch on the knife crime to start with. Prior to this post, I ran Portsmouth's high harm team and operations team. So knife crime is something I've been very actively involved with, and tackling some of the highest harm offenders. So it's something I have a good current recent experience of. Well, it's easy to say, isn't it? But the answer for me lies in the partnership approach to it, first and foremost. It's not a problem in many cases that you will enforce your way out of, particularly with our youth offenders, because locking them up in prison is really not the long-term solution. So it is about really putting a lot of resource into action plans to manage and divert attention. That's something that I've seen success with. And then taking that, it's been touched on. I think several people have mentioned that younger cohort of youths coming through, and that, as we've seen with our Basingstoke street gang, exactly that situation has been focused on in these recent weeks, and that approach is key to tackling knife crime, and that's engaging through our OPSEPTA weeks, which we do twice a year, some of our schools' engagement with that, and a range of other things. So, that links neatly into the stop and search. Now, having come to the district, I've been really pleased to support the launch of an advocacy scheme around stop and search, initially starting with Queen Mary College. That's being rolled out to BCOT, a number of other colleges as well, giving the safe space to young people to voice concern about and ask questions about stop and search affecting them. And for me, that's essential. It's something I really welcome. It's about our legitimacy. It's about trust and confidence. Because while stop and search is a vital power, it absolutely has to be used proportionately, legitimately, and with reasonable grounds. So Stop and search is, it will always form part of our tactical options. It should always be, quite a way down, not say the last resort, but it's really, a power to be used consciously and sparingly where it's justified. I've also been linked in with the local community group Basingstoke Unites Against Racism, looking at third-party reporting around issues, particularly around hate crime. This will link in with that as well. And I've also going to be invited to join Dame Maria Miller's BAME reference group, again to link in with some of these key issues around knife crime and stop and search that disproportionately affect our black communities. So I'm really passionate to sort of pick this up and really start making that connectivity, something I'm very passionate about. I think we got to e-scooters. Yes. Am I right in saying this? Forgive my ignorance. There's not an official scheme in Basingstoke, is there? No. I thought, because having come from Portsmouth, we saw the orange Voy scooters, and we started to work out some of the enterprising users were spraying their own private ones orange to look a little bit like the official ones. Very enterprising. It's a difficult one, isn't it? They, at face value, they are green, they are cheap, they make sense for short journeys, for all the positives that the people use them. But nonetheless, law is the law. We have a process in Hampshire whereby we issue a warning on the first occasion. Subsequent offending, so to speak, would lead to the vehicle or the scooter being seized. And we do that, but we have to be realistic about how much time we can spend doing that set against everything else. There is that proportionality check. I think you do have to sort of forward look with all of this around the wider legal agenda around our e-scooters. Pilots are rolling out in many of our towns and cities, and I know that the findings of these pilots is being reviewed through, I believe, the Department of Transport. So I think there is an agenda around their legitimate use outside of the official schemes, if that makes sense. So for policing around that proportionate response to them, it's a difficult path. We do rely on officers' common sense and sound judgment, and we do tackle them, particularly where that riding is antisocial, or dangerous. So it's and we are seizing quite a few of them, so we do what we can. So I don't know if that answers part of the question. There probably isn't a perfect answer.
No, that's marvellous. Thank you. That's really helpful. Obviously, there is what we see here is a huge link between e-scooters and county lines.
They're very much an enabler for all the obvious reasons. Yes, that's been seen. It's been seen in our cities. In Portsmouth, I certainly saw that. Yes, they fit the task very well.
But thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? No. Okay. Thank you, Scott. You got very lightly there. Yeah, I was in Portsmouth on Saturday, and there seem to be orange scooters everywhere.
It has proved very popular in Portsmouth, and to be fair, it's a very well-run scheme. So, yeah.
This middle-aged male was somewhat reluctant, but there we are. Now, if you're following the pages through the report, you'll, as I've mentioned earlier on, you'll notice that the Rushmore report has been duplicated, so we won't ask David to go through the same presentation again, and we move on to page 49, the Rushmore Heart District, and Kirsten, welcome.
I wouldn't mind if David needs to talk again, that would be fine, but okay, I'll go, shall I? So the different three priorities then, and I'll just follow up with a couple of comments from what we've talked about already today. First of all, antisocial behaviour, including youth-related incidents, and significantly, I think, neighbourhood nuisance. And I think we really need to recognise how significant the neighbourhood aspects of our antisocial behaviour are. I think just a few areas to highlight on, and that's we've talked about it, or it's the theme of tonight, I think, is the strength of the partnership that we have. And that includes on a day-to-day basis. So it's just to make sure the councillors and the public online appreciate that each morning we chair a meeting in Hart and Rushmore, and on that meeting we have the community safety leads from the council, but we also have the lead CPO as well from the council aspect. So we make sure that we're working together then, looking at what's come in the last 24 hours, or on a Monday, the last 72 hours. So we're responding quickly to themes of issues that have arisen and making sure that we look at the right resourcing response to that. So also, we've talked already tonight about the vulnerability operational group and how effective that is as what is now our people panel. And I think the thing that needs to sit alongside that is the new places panel, which will make a big difference to us then looking at prioritising and coming up with really clear action plans with a partnership approach, looking at location-based issues. If, for example, we talked about Hawley Woods earlier on. That's one example, but there'll be many others. At the moment, Aldershot Park is obviously an area of focus for us. In Rushmore, and there will be, when we talk with Hart colleagues about different locations at different times, and it will be that group that we can refer into to escalate issues and then make sure that we can lever different partners that we need as assets to tackle that. So I think that'll be really important around our antisocial behaviour. And then what I think is a real strength for us, policing-wise in Hart and Rushmore, is the relationships that community support officers have with the schools and the school charter visits and the contracts that we make with the schools. That works out really, really well, and that's sat alongside the patrol plans as well. I'm getting into the detail a bit of it, but it refers to, I think Councillor Jeff was asking earlier on about how we know how we keep that corporate memory going. So, you know, we do have a turnover of staff in Hart and Rushmore, probably more policing-wise than many of the other districts across the force. So we've got to make sure that we keep our corporate memory alive. So we have patrol plans for each neighbourhood across Hart and Rushmore, and I'm sure Basingstoke do the same, whereby we're keeping who are our community leaders, who are our connected people in the community, what hubs, what different groups have we got going on, and then what are our thematic issues that always appear in this particular neighbourhood each year, and just making sure we're keeping that corporate memory and also taking things forward. So that's another useful tool I was thinking about when you were speaking earlier, Councillor. Some of the training that we've done this year with the Early Help Hub and the police investment in the Early Help Hub, and that goes back to that early intervention theme that we've heard tonight as well, getting in early, looking at either those that are on the periphery of criminal exploitation or those young people and children that are in difficult situations that need extra levels of support, but it might not have escalated to the extent where they need an allocated social worker and intensive children provision. So that early help hub is really key to that early intervention, and the police investment is definitely there. We also have child-centred policing champions on our neighbourhood teams as well, to make sure that we're putting that child-centred focus on whether it's domestic abuse, whether it's exploitation, whether it's antisocial behaviour, whatever it is, to make sure that we're putting the child at the centre of whatever incident that we're looking at. Historically, and I think Scott will agree with me, within policing, if we deal with an incident that involves adults, you tend to look at the tall people in the incident and everything going on around them, and you can forget about the impact of the children witnessing whatever's gone on. And that child-centred focus across the force, but that we've taken up here, I think makes a big difference. So that's kind of some responses to the antisocial behaviour priority. In relation to serious violence, including knife blade offences and robbery, I'm really proud of the efforts that we've gone to with the exploitation work with criminal and sexual exploitation with young people, and how well the district operational missing exploited trafficked meeting works each month. And this is where we manage young people that have been identified and properly assessed at risk and are at risk of exploitation. The most serious of those are managed by a specialist team within Hampshire Constabulary alongside the specialist Willow team that was referred to earlier on. And then we also have that early intervention element attached to that, those that really are have a lot more risk factors attached to them as young people, rather than the protective factors we would want surrounding every child. So they will be managed then by neighbourhood teams alongside potentially social workers as well. That works really well. I'm really confident in how well that is gripped, and that there's really good plans around each of those young people that's discussed and chaired once a month by the child services manager. And that's working alongside then the High Harm Sergeant for Hart and Rushmore, Sergeant Wentworth, who tackles, looks at intelligence, looks at information, looks at occurrences that are happening through our daily processes, and then picks up on young people that we believe are a future risk. And this is getting in early to young people, looking at how are we then going to do visits and talking about the risk of county lines, talking about the risk of exploitation. So this isn't those involved in the gang, if you like, or the group of young people that are definitely involved in drug dealing. This is those right on the periphery, and looking at how we protect those on the periphery early doors. So I'm really pleased with the work that we've been doing alongside that. And also alongside that sits the work in partnership with drug addresses and the activities that we do with Vivid and other housing associations to tackle and prioritise. We can't tackle every address that we believe is involved in some way in drug dealing all at once. We have to prioritise which ones we tackle, and we do that on the basis of vulnerability. So where do we think the greatest vulnerability is? Does it involve children? Does it involve people that have additional needs? And we would start there and tackle those ones first. But again, that's a partnership approach to be able to do that. And then looking at then the third priority for the year, the crimes with historically low levels of reporting. We've spoken quite a bit around domestic abuse. One thing we've not mentioned tonight so far is the domestic abuse perpetrator work, which again, I'm pleased in how much Hart and Rushmore, policing-wise, we've led that and kind of been ahead of the force curve in relation to domestic abuse perpetrator work. And this is intensive work and looking at diverting and again using all of those partnership assets to go in and to have diversionary conversations with offenders. So it could be that they've not been dealt with through the court system in any way, but that doesn't mean that we can't go in and work with them and look at all the different options and try and get their engagement, to look at their relationships, look at their substance misuse, look at their employment and so on. And that work can be really positive. There's some good evidence base around the country in relation to it, and there's a force pilot that's rolled out across the force this year, and we've been very much front and centre of that in Hart and Rushmore, which I'm really pleased with. I won't talk too much about hate crime because it's been mentioned quite a bit already, but I've got a lot of confidence in the processes that we've got around hate crime, and what we don't have is a significant or hardly any repeat hate crime situations based in a domestic setting. The hate crime we get tends to be amongst young people in an online setting, or it tends to be hate crime which is perpetuated in public by people that don't know each other and doesn't have that additional threat risk when that person then goes home. So the hate crime that we do have, much as we treat it seriously, is not of that repeat issue that really has a longer lasting impact on the victims. Chair, unless you want me specifically to talk about anything else, I could talk about violence against women and girls all night, but that probably wouldn't be fair on everything else. But obviously that's an important topic that Rachel and I are really passionate about. I shall leave it there.
Thank you. So, opportunity for our four members from Hart and Rushmore. So, Councillor Walters, we just go round that way. Go first.
Thanks, Chairman. Thank you, Chief Inspector. Very detailed there, and I know you are doing a hell of a lot. Just two small points. First one is generally the feedback I get from residents. Residents know I'm an ex-police officer, and generally the conversation normally ends up talking about current policing and how policing used to be. one of the things that has come out is that many people seem to think, it's their opinion, that the contact for a victim is not always there. They wait weeks, they wait months, and I keep asking the question, have you heard back from the police yet? And they go, no, nothing. Do you still have victim contracts, and are they reviewed on a regular basis? I've got a second point after that, but I'll let you answer that one first.
Well done. One at a time with me is good. Thank you. And I think you're right. I don't think we do our victims justice sufficiently enough. We get it right some of the time, but we don't get it right enough of the time. And I think that's been recognised at force level, and it sits with one of our performance goals at the moment, not just victim satisfaction, but that keeping victims informed. It tends to be the area that the police fall down the most on. We can do an initial response when obviously officers get to an incident and give a really good service, and we generally get recognised really well for that. Obviously we're not always in control of the outcome if it's court related, but we can be in control of the outcomes away from the court system, which with restorative justice and other conditions that we can put attached to offending behaviour away from the court system can be really valuable. But it's that keeping people informed thing. So yes, we do have a victim contract system and a victim needs assessment. And actually, funnily enough, I looked in Scott's neighbourhood office earlier on, and there's been some tightening up of the processes and some extra scrutiny that's happening at force level and in the districts here. And I could see one of Scott's sergeants had put it all over the walls in the office over the road. So that expectation, that improvement is absolutely there, and the scrutiny will be there to help us land that.
Thank you. It's very good to hear. And the other one is probably something that's well outside what you're able to change in it in any way. Police.uk. This is promoted by the PCC on their website. It's the one-stop shop to find out all the local information, your contacts, your neighbourhood teams, your crime stats. Well, with SafetyNet gone, there's no feed to police.uk. That whole system for Hampshire is blank. Do we have any progress on what's happening?
You'll be pleased to know that I pointed that out to one of the police officers that works alongside the Police and Crime Commissioner, because it doesn't look good, and I made them aware that that's going to a link that doesn't give any data. And that's one of the reasons that we brought, well, not the only reason, but one of the reasons we brought in the engagement newsletter that we're using now in Hart and Rushmore, because actually police.uk doesn't give you current enough data. And it's not introducing you enough to your neighbourhood team if you've not met them before. I know that some of the other forces can get a better feed with their data systems. I'd love to say it was easy to resolve. It's complicated. I'm going to look at Scott in case he wants to jump in, because he's sometimes a bit more technically orientated.
Not often. No, you're quite right. This was, as I touched on, I was on our single online home project team for about a year. As SafetyNet was being decommissioned and this conundrum was rightly raised, and at the moment there is not an immediate solution for it. There was always that issue of keeping it updated. So of course what you saw on police.uk was as the churn of, especially particularly with the uplift of nearly 600 new officers coming in and being put into our neighbourhood teams, a significant administrative consideration in terms of having that information in that place. But nonetheless, you're right, there is no immediate answer to it, but you can still ask to contact officers for the area using the single online home, and it will get to the right place. Appreciate that's not quite the same as having, and here's the email address for PC so-and-so, beat manager for Brighton Hill or wherever. So I do take the point. Yeah.
Councillor Wildsmith.
One of the sort of two-part parts really. First one, we've not particularly massively long time since we sort of come out of lockdowns and sort of thinking around like lights of county lines and people being groomed. Obviously, there's been a long time where children have been locked up, just stuck with tablets and computers and potentially a lot more contact with other people. Are we starting to see, or is there any work we're doing to try and possibly mitigate that there, where there could have been people maybe more potentially maybe had a year and a half without anyone realising, where if you've been going to schools and things like that, people might have picked up on little bits beforehand. We're expecting that to maybe bring us more problems sort of locally.
Thank you. The one thing that strikes me listening to you is thinking about some of the tactical options that we use with some of our specialist departments around intelligence and the importance that that is to make our organisation work. I had contact with one of the specialist teams in Basingstoke recently about and I'm hesitating now whether it was a Hart or Rushmore case, I can't remember, but they had somebody in custody in relation to exactly that kind of stuff and online aspects. So much as I can't go into the details of the specifics of the tactics, safe to say that it was a really good result and that those specialist teams do work. And I think that sometimes some of the challenge is, obviously you've got the leaders for the neighbourhood teams here today, which are the ones you see day to day, but they aren't the only teams that exist across, say, for North Hampshire from a policing perspective. Scott's referred tonight to roads policing that we're working alongside for the car enthusiast work. Obviously, we've got the Basingstoke Investigation Centre up the road, and we've got our response and patrol teams running out of Basingstoke and Aldershot 24/7. Together with that, we've got joint operations unit with dog handlers, armed response vehicles and so on that work across the border with Thames Valley and with Hampshire. And then with that, we've got specialist teams across the force who will be working on cases across Basingstoke, Hart and Rushmore. So I think it's just important to kind of realise there's a whole host of other work that sits behind the neighbourhood officers, which are the ones that come and sit in front of you in panels like this. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
I suppose second point, I suppose, both when they're going on sort of divergent preparedness. One is sort of again about sort of around domestic violence. Of course, with the cost of living going up, we know that financial pressures can be one of the big contributing factors to domestic violence, whether it's men on women, women on men. Are we sort of prepared for an increase of that as things get more and more tight, and in particular, I suppose, in Hart, where it's considered to be an affluent area, so people don't think there are problems and forget that for an awful lot of people who do sort of struggle, so that's likely to exacerbate more. Are you prepared for that? And then my second question, I suppose, goes to both of you, and we've heard about the car meets, and luckily we don't get that issue in Hart, particularly because we're sort of more rural in a smaller area, but I'm sure people from Hart went to the farm ones and go to the Basingstoke ones. We hear about divergence and other things. What do you do for sort of divergence on that? Is there ever been a thought of trying to do something more organised? These people actually have somewhere official to go and do it, whether it's once a month, once a quarter, so it's a more controlled thing where even if it's the police involvement, who actually can be actually talking to them a bit more about sort of safety and things. So, because ultimately, if people have got these fancy cars, whether you and I are into it or not, and I couldn't really be bothered doing that for my car, but they enjoy doing it. It's something they want to do, is maybe should we look at facilitating things like that more before you sort out the problem in Basingstoke and do push it into Hart.
Are you proposing Blackbush Airport, somewhere like that, be the centre?
I'm sure my colleague over there wouldn't like it. It's the other side of the M3 to me there, but no.
I thought that might be the answer.
Say, it's already on the Blackbush Business Park. It's already a problem.
Yeah, I wasn't dismissing it. It was just I couldn't resist it.
Thank you. I'll come in on the car enthusiast, but you didn't learn the lesson from Lee earlier on. I've forgotten question 1, so you might have to go again with that in a minute. With the car enthusiast, I think it was just to kind of recognise the shift that we've had now in the last probably 6 months, I think, Scott, which is the massively increased strategic oversight through the force each day with the silver superintendent that runs the force for the day, and that includes in relation to car enthusiasts. So I suppose it would be to reassure the councillors and the public that the concern that this is for the public and the need for us to work well internally through roads policing, through neighbourhood policing teams, through different creative responses, and most importantly probably our intelligence directorate at how we're dealing with the the creative ideas to problem solve different locations, and the one that we have at heart is really quite different to the one that we've had historically in Farnborough. And I know that's been mentioned a few times tonight that they haven't come back. They may well come back. So let's just recognise the fact that you can manage these things, but you can't solve them completely. But you're right, the importance of intelligence and just recognising the amount of scrutiny that it has from a force leadership point of view, because we do absolutely hear the concern that it does with the community. If you want to add any.
Yeah, just on that very briefly, as Kirsten said, the intelligence picture is key. There are certain groups, we've seen in Basingstoke, certain groups who arrange their meets through certain platforms, might be Insta, might be WhatsApp or whatever, and some are relatively organised to varying degrees, with a degree of responsibility, dare I say, to be absolutely balanced, and they don't cause so many problems, and they are smaller meets. And that links into the intelligence process around, which is assessed. It goes through that command structure, as Kirsten explained, through to a public order specialist. Because actually, what this actually is about is what we call POPs in police language, public order, public safety, and it's assessed in that way. And where we have seen some of these extremely large gatherings of, yes, as I think was alluded to in Rushmore, hundreds of vehicles, that would elicit and justify a public order response, where you'd actually have public order trained officers to actually go and have that physicality to deal with the antisocial behaviour that's and other criminality that may be present. But obviously, there's an element of sledgehammer to crack nut consideration. A lot of the meets we have seen in Basingstoke in recent times have been smaller, typically between 15 and 50 cars, with fewer reports of antisocial behaviour and criminality. So we do have to have that proportionality around it.
I suppose just goes back to my point there, and I don't feel it's got an answer. Has anything been looked at and trying to actually organise something for them so they don't have to do it? Then if they do it, you've got some officials to go who can come down hard on them, because it actually gives them somewhere to go. Because ultimately it's probably going to take a lot of the people, because most people want to do it legally, they want to do it legitimately, they don't want to upset people or break the law. Yeah. Give them somewhere to go. I'm sure as a partnership
I think that's a really good point, something that I'm happy to sort of look at. I think whether that's one for the police to do, or whether it's one for local authorities to consider, or indeed actually we consider if it's on private land with the consent of the landowners, then most people are probably quite happy. Is it something for the groups to actually have that conversation with those groups, which we do have when we engage with them? So I think that will be a work in progress. I think that won't be a quick win, but it's something that needs to be on the radar, doesn't it? So good suggestion.
Councillor Bedford, do you have a question? Councillor Butcher.
Yeah, please. I've got two, and I'll keep them quite simple. They're at both ends of the spectrum, really. One is related to the prevalence of drug dealing in Fleet Town Centre. There's two pubs in particular where if you go in there on a Friday or a Saturday night, you'll see easy access to dealers just walking around the pubs very, very openly. It's a fairly well-known group. It's been reported several times, so it'd be good to understand what is being done to address that, particularly in Fleet Town Centre, because it has been raised by many residents. With that.
Thank you. So I think what I'm really pleased to have is such an active and good relationship between the council licensing officers and the police licensing officer, who's very detailed and very thorough. I've absolutely no doubt he will know the finer detail of that, which I don't know as I'm talking to you now, but I can absolutely find that out from PC Dennett as to what's the plans in connection with it, what's already been done, because having that will absolutely affect their licence, and is the sort of thing that we would be looking at. Do we need to go to review for these premises? How is the premises managing it? How are we supporting them with it? So there's a lot of aspects attached to the licence conditions that I would hope would help us manage that situation. So I think that one I might have to come back to you on for some more detail.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the answer. I did kind of expect that. And the other question is at the other end of the spectrum. It's actually related to bike crime. Okay. There's a very high level of bike thefts across the whole of Fleet, particularly from Fleet Station and also from the High Street. But there is now a perception, because it's being difficult to report, and the perception from the general public is that it's futile reporting it because nothing will happen. And I'm concerned that the stats aren't actually showing the high levels of crime and the organisation behind it, because it's just not been reported. Because when I asked, I was told anecdotally that there'd only be, I think, 4 or 5 bike crimes reported in the area in the previous quarter. But I could pick up, just from going through the Facebook groups, about 15 to 20 per month being stolen.
I absolutely believe it's underreported. And when I've looked at the statistics, and I think we've talked about it in previous meetings, and when I've looked at the statistics, it doesn't relay the concerns that the public have got. And I know that the value of some bikes when they get stolen, there's a massive amount of money on some of these bikes, and the impact that has on travel to work and all that kind of aspect. So we absolutely have to get the reporting right, because if we don't get the reporting right, we can't link crime patterns, we can't be in the right place, and then we can't tackle the intelligence attached to it. It is as simple as that. And we have to look at how we promote the QR code, how we more actively use the counsellors in the wards, the pop-up surgeries, the newsletter that goes out from Heart Council, our newsletter, all of this to try and promote the importance of reporting, and how the constabulary, okay, slower than any of us would ever want, but we are trying to make that difference to the reporting routes to better enable it. Because if it goes unreported, we really can't problem solve it.
Thank you. Before we move on from the Hampshire, sorry, Rachel, come in.
Sorry, I just had one thing to add on that I've been in conversation with the PCSO in Fleet Town Centre. We're going to do a couple of events over the summer, possibly in connection with BTP down at the station, where we'll get some stickers or markers provided for people to be able to mark their bikes up. It's not necessarily going to stop it, but it will raise some awareness around it, and they can register on the bike register scheme. So just to say that we have been having those conversations, and hopefully we'll get those underway.
Thank you. Before we move on, can I just make a couple of points about victim support or reporting back. 18 months ago, I was a victim of quite a serious crime of fraud from a potential business partner, personal fraud, threats and blackmail. And to be honest, I was staggered by the amount of support I got from the police and other agencies. It was outstanding, and thank you for that. And also on a personal level, through myself as chair, thank Kirsten for the support she gave myself as a ward councillor and the family of the 17-year-old young guy that was stabbed and died in Surrey. We're having some problems the following morning with the family support group from Surrey, but Kirsten intervened and it was put on track very, very quickly. So again, on behalf of that, and the funeral is going to be the 15th. Okay, thank you. Moving on to the couple of reports where people have been sat patiently for many hours, and I could see that Lieutenant Colonel Burley was engrossed in the dialogue of the various local authorities, but thank you for being so patient, and could you give us your update on the...
impression as headquarters is that the level of crime across our estate is pretty low. However, if we did step into the world of social media, we'd have a different impression. But when we track back with Hampshire, we generally find that there's no reporting to substantiate anything that comes up on social media. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened. It may mean that people haven't reported it. Have we tried to counteract that? Thank you for bringing up the networking hubs that we do hold monthly in the community hub. A great tool where we get all the agencies in there, PCSOs, and hopefully get our residents in there. We have encouraged them to use 101, but sometimes you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. It's easier to put it on Facebook than put it on 101. But we are working towards that. But overall, we don't think there is a massive problem within our estate. There are several issues in our southern estates. We do have issues with drugs paraphernalia around some of the married quarters patches, but generally we get out there and clean that up. That's not too much of a problem. We have worked with some of the agencies that work with addicts down there, and we don't really think it's necessarily a problem to do with them. But it it is quite low. Probably in terms of antisocial behaviour, the biggest problem my residents would tell me they've got is speeding lorries, and that would be in the northern estates. What have we done to try and do that? We've conducted surveys. We've spoken directly with some of the haulage companies that use that route on several occasions to ask to remind them of the speed limits, 20 miles an hour on some of those roads. But when you're in a tipper truck with a pneumatic seat, you go over the speed humps at about 40. To the extent that we have some residents complaining that stuff is falling off the shelves in their front rooms, and I quite believe it. What are we doing about that in the long term? We are actually in the process of reviewing the roads, Camp Farm Road in particular, and we are looking to put a road narrowing scheme in there so that the trucks can no longer go up there. So it will reduce the access all the way through to residents only in cars and light vehicles. Yes, we did have some of the car sports enthusiasts move down onto the Wellington Memorial Car Park. The main reason for that was the security contractor wasn't closing the gate on time. Why wasn't the security contractor closing the gate on time? It's because they've been receiving verbal abuse from people who've either been locked in the car park or people who have been asked to leave the car park. But we've now emphasised to the contractor that they are to enforce the locking of that gate at 8 o'clock at night. So hopefully that problem will go away. It isn't something we've experienced before, but it has something that came up in the last few weeks. The only other issue we've probably had is over the last year we've had a couple of occasions when travellers have come onto our land, but generally our reaction to that is to go and speak to them, and generally they leave within 24 hours. But apart from that, I've got no real problems.
Questions to Lieutenant Colonel Burley? Councillor Bedford.
Thank you very much. When I was talking earlier about doing walkabouts with our PCSs, I've never gone on to the garrison land, simply because I felt that you had your military police keeping an eye on things. Would we be welcome there?
So we do have the PCSOs patrolling on our estates. We don't generally have the RMP patrolling on the estates. They're not employed in that role. They do policing, but it is generally reactive because they cover the whole of the southeast of England. A pretty big beat, probably bigger than either of yours. So they are not employed to do beat patrols. We don't have an MOD police service presence in Aldershot anymore. Many years ago that left. I have a very small capability that's about to be reduced to do visible military patrolling. So we are reliant on whatever Hampshire's finest can do for us. Really, we're quite lucky that a lot of our states will self-police, and I don't mean we've got vigilantes out there with pickaxes. They keep an eye out for each other. So we don't have some of the other problems. One of the problems we have got in Quetta Park, which obviously sits in Hart area, is where we've got mixed housing there. We do have issues with people raising complaints about their civilian neighbours smoking cannabis in the garden. So I was quite interested with David said about the letters that were getting written from Rushmore. So I don't know whether Hart doing something similar. So it's something I wasn't aware of. So obviously our people don't smoke because it's in the contract. But obviously, we can't bear down on their civilian neighbours. But so that was a useful thing to find out. Yeah.
Any further questions? A question for me, Lieutenant Colonel. I was speaking today to my colleague, Councillor Nadia Martin, who represents Wellington Ward in Aldershot. I think she's the only councillor elected in the UK that's married to a serving soldier. She was saying that even though your report doesn't really mention domestic violence, that there's a disproportionate amount of unreported domestic violence. And I wonder if she could contact you to talk in a bit more detail about that.
Yeah, she's certainly.
There's lots of sort of
I've seen
networks
quite a lot over the last
she's
the last few weeks.
She's very good, isn't she? Yeah.
Which is good to see. She's certainly getting out and about with NEMFAPA now, so that's a good relationship we've got there. But I have spoken with Kirky. We have got some work to do on domestic violence, sexual violence, violence against females. Not that we think it's an overbearing problem, But what I have to get across, or what I need to get across to some of the commanders in the garrison who deal with the discipline, is there's two sides to a story, if that makes sense. Often they're very...
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah, often they're, you know, we don't look to protect our own, but sometimes the emphasis is more placed on, you know, the needs of the army, you know, shall we say, than actually understanding what the problem is. So we need to be better. We need to be better at recognising the problem and dealing with the problem before it moves on to a point where it becomes, something that is requiring intervention of a much worse, start type.
That's very encouraging to hear you say that, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. By all means, Nadia, come up and have a chat with me. That's not a problem at all. But Nikki, I only talked to her about that today, about getting back in touch with you about that. But we are keen to roll that out.
Yeah, thank you for any further questions to Lieutenant Colonel Burley. But thank you for sitting there so patiently. It's and talking about being patient, Jess, from the Clinical Commissioning Group, over to you.
Thank you. And again, this will be brief. Unfortunately, the last 2 years, the NHS has obviously been distracted by COVID and then subsequently the vaccine rollout. Most of us have been deployed out to other roles. However, we have kept close to some of the issues that are relevant to the partnership. The first one being we continue to look at our patients that attend ED and use our ambulance services regularly, up to, every day of the year. And the relevance of that is, one, we're looking at some psychological sort of support for them, but what we want to do is something we were looking at before COVID, and that was mapping out all the other groups that there might be overlap with. So, for instance, you've talked about the people's meeting, so you could share some of these individuals at the VOG. Antisocial behaviour panels, may have some of the same individuals. And then we've got the social inclusion partnership with the MEME, so Making Every Adult Matter, that cohort as well. So what we want to do in the spirit of partnership working is get to a point where we can share our resources, and I'm not meaning financially necessarily, but our thinking, what we've got available to us across health, housing, to wrap around support around individuals to see if we can, together we can make a difference. So that's something I'm looking forward to working with partners on. The other thing is, before COVID, I was involved in the Mutual Gain engagement programme, which was in Oakwood in Basingstoke. Haven't been able to actively be part of it the last year, but I have promoted it to local residents. Hopefully they turned up for the event. One of the reasons we're really interested in that community engagement approach is it's something that we can use for health, listening to the local residents about the solutions. So I'll be getting in touch with Dan to see how that went. I believe the event's happened now, hasn't it?
It has.
Yes.
From, I believe there was about 80 people which attended, which is really good. And then some follow-on work which is going to take place with some of the schools to get young people's views as well.
Brilliant. Okay. So, yeah, I'll be in touch. Haven't really thought much about low-level reporting, but again, there must be a place for health services to think about how we can promote reporting of crime. So, happy to continue those conversations in the new year. Any questions?
Yeah. Any questions to Jess? Councillor Wilde-Smith.
Yeah, one question. Has sort of been an increase in people sort of repeatedly using the call out of emergency services for being, and obviously for people every day it's harder and harder to get hold of doctors. So have you been finding there's been an increase in, say, sort of mental health issues where people are then sort of repeatedly, is that something which is sort of exacerbating through?
I haven't got the data to hand, but I know that during the height of COVID, everything did settle down for ambulance calls out, EDs, attendances. But I think that would be interesting to look at now we're getting back to normal with obviously the reports of difficulties accessing primary care. So, yeah, it's definitely something I'll go back and have a look at.
Further questions? Again, on a personal level, can I just praise the community mental health team? Again, as a result of my incident, I was treated by them an amazing support. So, and I know that's said by other residents, so that's really good. And we have a weekly surgery, and someone came last week, and this is probably not the right forum, but the question was, what's harder to get hold of, an appointment with a doctor or get through on 101? And I didn't answer. Thank you for that, and again, thank you for being so patient during the course of the evening. If we to page 63, which is the Fire and Rescue Service, we haven't got a representative there tonight. So if we could note their report, but I think, Dan, if there's any people have any queries or questions on that, where should they address those?
We can, yeah, certainly. Ryan Furman is the group commander for Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service across the North Hampshire area, and if there are any questions, yeah, myself or colleagues in Rushmore and Hart would certainly be able to put you in touch with the right person if there are any questions.
Okay, thank you. And Young Offenders Team, you wanted to comment on that, didn't you? Okay.
Our colleague from the Youth Offender Team sends her apologies. She had to leave on the dot of 8 o'clock, was patient, didn't get round to her, and did invite questions via a similar avenue if there's any questions for our youth offending teams. Apologies on her behalf.
Thank you. That concludes really the reports. Would anyone, any comments or questions before I ask Daniel to sum up what we see as the key or the feedback from tonight? Yeah, Councillor Ardsmith.
I suppose the one big thing which has come out of tonight, isn't it, is about reporting, whether it's this, and I know we get in licensing as well, where you quite where we could have ruled a different outcome on licensing hearing if people had reported, because they kept going on about it, but you had no reports. It's the same with the sort of police there. If people aren't reporting it, we obviously as a partnership, as councillors across all things, just need to work out how, and I'm sure we said it for the last 2-3 years, but we need to get better at it and work a way that we can encourage people to just report everything. And it says more data you have, the more you can sort of do with it. And I think that's a big takeout, and we really need to push on with that in the next 6 months. So we're going to be saying the same thing this time next year as well.
Yeah, I mean, the public assume that Facebook will magically, comments on Facebook will be magically picked up and processed. And we have a process where we have a very strong and well-used community Facebook page in Northtown. People put it on there. I will then, or my colleagues will report it to the police, and then the PCSOs will come back and say, you should really report it, you should really be asking them to do it directly. But with this fast new system that has been promoted tonight, it will increase, I'm sure. Any further questions or observations or comments? Okay, Daniel, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, throughout the meeting I've made some notes as well, just on some of the key themes which have come up, so hopefully everyone's in agreement with what they are. I think first of all, it's been noted about the strength of the partnership work which takes place together with all the partners which are in the room today, and certainly from being part of that partnership working, we see that from the inside as well, and I think it's really good relationships. I think quite often with community safety, people quite often think initially go straight towards the police, and then sometimes local authorities, but it's amazing the contribution which other partners make into that as well, and us all working together does allow for us to tackle what we've set out to do in a much better and more collaborative way. So I think it's important. I feel that, and hopefully people agree, that that's been recognised. Some of the key themes in relation to the feeling of safety and fear of crime, particularly after dark, and how as a partnership we can tackle some of them issues, with particular focus around violence against women and girls. Secondly, encouragement and promotion of reporting crime and antisocial behaviour, and what tools are available for members of the public which are affected by crime or disorder to be able to report things, and be empowered to do so. Thirdly, that focus on antisocial behaviour, and obviously that's come up through numerous conversations which we've had today as well, and how important that is to local residents. I think we are fortunate in the local area, and backed up by some of the data which we've got available as well, is that whilst serious crime does happen, the vast majority of the community aren't affected by that. However, they are affected by other issues which are happening, and it's important, and some of that can be antisocial behaviour. Some of them building up over a period of time, can have a significant detrimental effect on their well-being. So it's important that as a partnership we can focus together on some of them lower level issues as well. Early intervention and the importance of this, so particularly around young people and how we can work better to increase outcomes. And lastly, I suppose it links in with the focus on kind of antisocial behaviour really, and how that should be focused on. I think, that's the key point. Hopefully everyone's kind of in agreement with that's kind of summarises some of the key points and discussions which come back. Really interestingly, we're in the process of finalising the strategic assessment for the current year, so for 22-23 at the moment, and that'll be worked through with partners to get final agreement on that. Now, reassuringly, a lot of them points have already come out for our own assessment as well, so there's clearly some good link, and actually we're already aware through some of the data which we've got and through some of our priority setting what that will be. But this will help shape that as well, so actually the timing for that's been really positive, and can influence on some of that priorities to then provide some of the feedback for that for the next joint crime and disorder overview and scrutiny.
Thank you, Daniel. Before I close the meeting, any further comments or observations from anyone? Thank you. One for selecting me as the chair for tonight. Hopefully it's been run okay. Can I thank you all for your attendance, your patience, but above all, the contribution that everyone's making to try and make everyone's life a little bit safer, and continue those dialogues outside of meetings. Continues to, as we have cops and coffee or whatever you want to call it in your local area, to encourage people to just come and report. But thank you all very much indeed. Every contribution has been welcome. Thank you. And I've never had to done this before. Meeting closed.